Hey everybody, this is Allison Pillow with the Integrate Yourself podcast. I'm with,
Maya Gottlieb.
hey Maya.
Hey.
Okay, so today I just wanted to, well, I guess this is our first, technically our first video podcast. We're trying something new, which is kind of exciting. Um, and I wanted just to bring up a quick subject of I think our last podcast we talked about movement and energy, and today I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, but also what I thought was really interesting because I went to a book signing the other night to see Katie Bowman, and she has a new book out called Movement Matters. And it's really interesting because her perspective on movement is actually similar to our perspective about nutrition. And I wanted to, because I think it's all really one and the same. It's just that everybody's coming from a different way of seeing it, right? So she calls it the science of being sedentary. And she talks about cellular biology and about how, you know, moving, actually getting things to circulate or moving certain parts of the body, the make stretching areas actually creates that circulation, which she calls nutritious movement. So, which brings more nutrients to that area, right? And so, what we talk about actually is energizing the cells also in that way, but in a different way nutritionally by actually giving the body the nutrients that it needs for the cells to actually become more, I guess, like conductors of energy. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that to start?
Yeah, we can. I think where I've kind of come from was from the point where the nervous system is actually always looking for new ways to adapt, and we are conditioned into our patterns. So we put ourselves in a place of where we can't always learn new things unless we do that. And if we do that, then you got to find that folly in it where you may not feel comfortable, it may not feel right. And so you tend to go back into your normal movements. But challenging yourself is actually a way for the nerves to grow, basically to get new receptors and stuff. And so not only does the cellular respiration happen, you're actually creating new signals for the brain, for the body. And as we get older, it's vital, absolutely vital.
I agree. And so, what do you think about? So, what happens with a person? Let's just have an example here. A person who is, the hormones are changing. Let's just use a woman, for example, who's going into menopause, and then so you've got excess stress hormones. You don't have as much progesterone to offset the estrogen. So, and the person may not be eating enough. So, what does that do to that signal in the body, even though they might be moving? Um, but maybe they're not nourishing themselves on a regular basis. What does that, if they're still trying to do it on the movement side, what does that do to the signals though? I mean, does it like, could you give a picture of what that would look like for someone? Like what I see with that is fibromyalgia, inflammation, um, and just a lack of I guess motivation, just because the body cannot create enough energy to actually to deal with certain emotional things, or even just really just the simple tasks that we have to do in a daily in a day. So yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, I guess, what is your perspective on that? Like what that would look like for someone, and how would you, I guess, help someone if they were in that position?
Well, I mean, we could go back to the core ideas of knowing what your temperature and pulse is, because that's going to not going to give you that's going to give you like the baseline of things, but also like how much stress you have in your life. Like, are you placing yourself in a routine where you're constantly creating some kind of I've got to do, and but you feel like you just don't have any more bandwidth to do anything, but it's this level of mental stress that kind of comes out. And when you don't have that energy where, and we say energy in a means of like low energy, we talked about before, was where you feel like you have the sense of knowing that you're feeling kind of tired, but you're not feeling like totally exhausted. But what you're kind of doing is pushing yourself to exhaustion. So a lot of times we kind of come into a space of where we're going to go with our energy when we're already at the bottom. And so then you're confusing the body by saying, I got to go work out. I've got to go work out. If that's the only way I'm going to lose weight. No, I mean, that is, you just are constantly creating the same symptoms over and over again, because what happens to the body is it's saying, nope, she needs me to keep going. I'll just keep going. And I'm going to keep producing those stress hormones, and I'm going to keep making sure that I, keep up with her, because that's what's going on. Most of us don't want to sit there and think rest is the cure, because what we ultimately kind of bring ourselves to believe is that if we have rest, it's going to cause us to be fat,
Yeah,
because
that's a fear, right?
the obesity ideas of life is that if you see someone overweight sitting down, that's a shame because they don't get up and go do something. Well, maybe their body actually needs the rest because they're already filled with stress hormones that can't allow themselves to will themselves somewhere farther. Or you have the reverse. You have someone who constantly cannot sit down
Yeah.
because they have to keep going. They have to do some, mountain exercise, or they have to keep this going. They got to keep this figure, or even the simple ideas of, cardio is important for the heart. And, these are all slightly myths based on what we're not seeing the body have to do when you're in your certain level of stress.
Right. And I think that we probably want to clarify what's wrong with someone who wants to keep moving, right? And what I see when I see that, because I've seen myself in that position many times, is that it's the nervous system that can't really calm down. And when our nervous system can't calm down, that creates other problems. So with the hormones, with our stress response. But I think a lot of the things that are in the fitness community or the diet nutrition community go towards the like more movement is better, and burning fat, which is another stress response of the body. So all these things are like deemed as healthy, but yet but when we talk about this, I guess we need to get clear on like why that's not healthy. And so what, but then again, what steps can people do? And I'm asking for myself as well. So like I'm going through a little bit of a detox myself right now, and I went through a time when I just kind of lost all my energy. I had to really rest for a long time, and now I'm getting back to adding more stress to my life, in a good stress with more exercise, more lifting, back again, bringing that back in, and building strength. But it's like I'm finding that it's like, well, there's a certain rhythm to it, right? So you find that you get kind of to your limit in a way, and you recognize it a little bit better when you've toned it down a bit, when your nervous system isn't like going crazy, or on edge. And then you find that rhythm where you're like, okay, it's time to rest. I need to give my body what it needs. I need to give it back nutrition, the certain good nutrition, and rest. And then I can get back on, adding a little more stress. But it's kind of like it kind of goes, kind of up and down a little bit. And so instead of just a linear kind of line straight up, you have to realize when it's time to, bring it back down. So that's what I've found for myself. But like for somebody like that, I guess we can talk about both extremes, like somebody that's, so sedentary that they just can't get off the stove. They don't have any energy to do anything. Like, where do they start? You know? Because they have to
Right.
eventually, eventually I feel like movement would be good for that person. It's just like what kind of movement and like what kind of nutrition. I think probably, and what I've seen a lot when I work with overweight clients, is they're not actually eating frequently enough, and that seems to be a recurring theme. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well, most of the reasons why they're showing people in obesity is based on how they live their lives. And most of them don't eat breakfast. Most of them put themselves in a place of long hours between foods, sitting in areas that keep them contained. So there's, at their desk, and we're just giving the basics. I mean, there are the people who do stand at their desk and stuff like that. But mainly, we're talking about the people who are very sedentary, the people that live lives just feeling like they can never lose weight. They have no ways of changing it, and so they give up and kind of put themselves in that self-helplessness mode. And if to kind of guide somebody, you have to kind of move it really slow, like transitioning to this kind of nutritional diet. And then we say diet very lightly, it's more of a lifestyle. You're really having to just take one thing at a time and give yourself patience, which is then where you have to go into the mental realm of saying, how do you help someone be okay with where they're at? Because they want to be somewhere different and they keep yearning to go somewhere different, but they're not happy within themselves. They're going to keep sabotaging themselves. So there's a whole other lining of why we use holistic coaching to help people get to the base of where they're at. Because once you get to why, you may find, someone has been abused or may have had some childhood repression or some kind of moment in their life where it kind of impacted them so severely that they just never really took notice and they just grew through it. And then it kind of comes back in their life later on. And then when you start to delve into why the change isn't happening, where that part of them has to meet, the rubber meets the road, is where they have to say, okay, I've got to let go of that in some way or fashion and say, I'm okay, I'm here, I'm doing what I can at this moment, and I need to go slow with myself. So there's that self-care aspect and the loving and kindness to oneself and being one's own cheerleader. Because when you start to become a cheerleader for yourself, you're really kind of saying to yourself, I accept myself at this moment right now, and nothing that I have done is wrong. All I am doing is realizing if I hadn't gone through all that stuff, I would never be where I am now. And I think when we start to get that point across, people start to relax and stop bringing in the shame and the guilt for what they think they did wrong. Because a lot of body image is about shame and guilt. Whether or not you're bad, or you're, like being fat means, oh, I'm bad, and so then if you constantly walk around in that state of mind, you're allowing yourself to do things where I'm a bad person. And then you start to even be more self-destructive, maybe doing a little bit of bulimia and anorexia, very light gray shades. Oh, where you may not be throwing up in the toilet behind some trash can somewhere or doing some kind of oddities, but you are doing things like skipping meals where you're, maybe not, you're gorging out at times. So
That's a good point.
that,
I didn't think about it like that, but that is, yeah, good point about, I mean, there's levels of eating disorders, right? You could be too
yeah, and
restrictive, you
we're
know.
all we're
Yeah,
all part of that. It
yeah.
kind of comes in shades of gray, and whether it's shame or now the guilt where I feel like I'm an overeater, so I count my calories all the time or I need to exercise all the time, and then you're just kind of in that place of guilt where I did something that is bad for me, and I'm kind of going into that um you know I translate it into a space of I'm the person that's bad, but I also am a person that is like overweight and kind of leaning into this habit, the behavioral part of it.
Right.
So you go into a guilt, right? I can't stop myself. I want to keep doing this, but I want that. And we kind of back and forth trade in from shame to guilt to kind of how we're going to keep ourselves contained in this I can't change because I don't know what it would be like if I let go of my story.
Yeah, it's kind of like staying close to the familiar, like it, because that's what feels safe. Even if the familiar is very damaging to you and it's not healthy, you still tend to want to stay close to that because you don't know what is beyond that. You don't, it's a mystery sometimes. It's
Or you do,
scary sometimes, I
or
guess,
you
too.
might know,
Yeah.
and then you have the sabotager inside you that says, I get my needs met this way. I really need to stay here, and I want to be this way because then I can kind of repeat the reasons of woe is me. Oh my gosh, this is never going to work. All these kind of stories that keep us running in the same cycles.
Yes. So, okay, that was a great perspective. That was, I really enjoyed hearing that. I think that I would like to talk about the other end of the spectrum, which is something I can really relate to, having a very, what do you call it? I guess a hyperactive nervous system. And it's almost to the extent where you have trouble even feeling, because you're just so, you just feel like you got to keep moving. You got to really, I know it's kind of like when I think about people who get massages, they really like the massages where you just dig into the person, and like it's painful as hell, but they love it because they just want to feel something, right? Because they're so hyper active, right? Their nervous
Hmm.
system is just like, it's just on fire. So, um, those kind of people, I mean, we're just saying, these are generalities, and there's a little bit of us in all of this, so we're not really like making anybody stand out for to call anybody out. This is just kind of giving people examples of extremes so they can see that maybe in themselves, and what these things could mean, right? So, so I guess my point going forward with that is, I guess it would relate to the high endurance athletes, people who are in the gym, the weekend warrior people, always on the cardio machines. Even like, now it's like pretty much if you're doing these, uh, I guess, cardio based weightlifting workouts, because, doing as much as you can, like in 30 seconds to a minute. Some of the CrossFit classes have been doing that. And so that's a more cardio, I guess, uh, centric kind of way to go about a weightlifting workout, because, weightlifting for me is like doing, you do some moderate to heavy lifts, about 5 reps, maybe 3 to 4 sets of that, and you rest in between. So, but I would think that people who just really need that, they need that adrenaline rush, they need the stress hormone response to feel alive, and then they totally just are exhausted by the end of the day. That would be the people on the other end of the spectrum who maybe are moving too much and not really reading their body. And then eventually, what that leads to is a total shutdown. It could be possibly autoimmune response, which I've seen in a lot of people. Um, and they're like, what's going on? I'm eating these foods and I'm having these reactions to it, or I'm just breaking out because in this like in this rash, for no reason at all. And it has a lot to do with the nervous system and being able to get that to a state of calmness, and it's just they're always turned on. So, uh, yeah, what do you think?
I think what mostly we're talking about now is histamine reactions for the skin and how that is kind of translating back to the cortisol and adrenaline aspects. And where the shutdown of the vagus nerve causes, or the excitation of the vagus nerve can create different things in the body. And when you kind of look at the uh, breakdown of how we will synthesize stress. You could have someone who just has so much on their plate, and then we talk about doing cardio or doing something that's just going to send them right more into more of the hyperactive state that they already are in. And so what we kind of have to do is bring back, like, this is a symptom. The symptoms that you're having are coming through your body in different feedback loops. So if it's your skin reaction, or it's because you're having a hard time quieting the mind, or if you're having aches and pains, these things first become a stress. Oh my gosh, yes, after I've done my big workout, I feel so much better. And then that keeps you on the addictive side of it because you are getting release of those those stress hormones, but they're covering up what's really going on. And then we go back to, okay, if I take a rest, I feel worse than I started. And that is where working with someone is very vital, because they don't know how bad it's going to get before they can get better. And by having someone who's been through some of that process, or being through some of that mental struggle, because you think you're going to be one place, but then you end up becoming even worse than when you start, is there needs to be a community of helping one another to kind of bring back that, look, you're just allowing the stress hormones not to rule your life. And it's not to say stress hormones are totally bad. Let's make that a big caveat. It's that it's not causing symptoms that are showing up in your body that you're ignoring, because eventually those things get worse, because they then start to get into autoimmune. They then start getting into fibromyalgia or some parts of us, because we're constantly ignoring the small, subtle things like, this isn't big, this isn't something I need to worry about right now. But those things are what we need to start paying attention to prior to going into these bigger issues.
Right. And not to get obsessed about it, just to pay attention to it and just say, hey, this is something that I just need to be aware of. And this could be, a sign of something else that's going on. And so, without getting obsessed or about it, like, oh my God, or freaked out or fearful. Right. Um, so
Right.
yeah.
So back to what you were saying about, the differences. If we looked at one sedentary and one person that's overstimulated, there is a similarity. It's just one is being symptomatic and differently played out more than the other. So like you just got a level of fatigue that is coming in certain waves. And so we're kind of giving information for people to say, there is no difference between the couch potato and the over exerciser. What we are just levels of where our extremes come from.
Right.
And that's the importance of why we feel like frequency of your meal frequencies and ratios are the vital parts of how to start this and kind of see the change slowly.
Right, and let's talk about what that means, because some people may not know what food frequency and ratio mean. Like, so food frequency would be eating. Like, I usually start someone if they say, hey, I only eat every 5 hours, or I wait 5 hours between meals. I usually start them, try to, start bringing those meals a little bit closer together, either by adding one snack between the meals, or say, hey, do your best to start by eating every 3 hours and then go up to 2 hours and go as frequently every 2 hours for a while until your body starts to stabilize again, right? And then the ratios mean like the ratio or the percentage of macronutrients that you have in your meal. So a certain percentage of protein, certain percentage of fat, and a certain percentage of carbohydrate. Now, we don't want to leave out any of those macronutrients. We are not, Maya and I do not advocate leaving out any certain macronutrient for any, or advocating a diet that like that. We are always advocating eating it all, because your body needs it needs the good fat, good protein, and carbohydrates to actually metabolize the food that you're taking in. They need each other. So, as well for energy production. So, yeah. But going back to the cellular, I guess I found this word the other day on the Daniel Roddy. I think I was reading his book called Hair Like a Fox, and I think it's interesting, even though I don't really, baldness is not my concern, but I think it's interesting to look at it from that perspective, because his theory is that the stress hormone response for men is, and an increase in estrogen can be causing premature baldness in men, which is an interesting theory that not many people have talked about. But he called what we describe, I guess, our nutrition approach to be bioenergetics, which I thought was kind of cool, right?
Yeah. His big thing is the prolactin and the levels of
Right.
prolactin in our body. And what that is actually helping you see the androgens and the progesterone and those levels and how they're affecting the glucose in your system. So if you think about the least important thing right now in a body, it's probably your hair development versus your heart and your
Sure.
lungs and things going on.
But for men,
So
it's important, right?
yeah,
It
we all
really
have our
is.
issues, right?
Yeah. And
Women
some
have
women
the
have that
waist.
issue too, actually. So,
Yeah, alopecia is
yeah,
definitely somewhere we're kind of, all kind of worried as, aging process happens. And one of those biggest issues is trying to recognize that your body will reduce the need to grow hair when you are in stress. And I
right.
think he brings a great
It's not high on the
light.
list.
Yeah, he brings a great light to it because he brings that idea that, you're not conditioned by your grandparents, your great grandfather on your mother's side, and gets away from that gene dominant knowledge that's been kind of going on for a while, where
Hmm.
the Geno Project has really been shown up in the past as not worked. And so people have been told that they're based on their genes. You can get that me123 and find your DNA and all that. But what the underall knowledge is that your environment affects your DNA. And so it's not all about what your DNA expresses from your parents and onward from back from 7 generations. It's your environment and how you cultivated it combines more of that effect than just the small parts of what we kind of, oh, this is just because my grandmother had this, or this is because my grand,
Right. We rely too
but
much on that, I think. Yeah. Or
yeah, but
we believe
mainly,
that story too much, I should say.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think from my point of view, it kind of made me realize how much more responsibility I needed to take care of about myself, and give
Right.
me a liberating feeling that I can't just blame everything on my parents, you know?
Well, as much as we'd like to, right?
Right.
No,
I
you
mean,
can't. Yeah. And being a parent makes you think, oh my God, I'm not, I have so much compassion for them now because, especially as my kids become teenagers, I'm like, oh my goodness.
they have
Yeah.
no idea. I did not know how I did not know that either. It was like realization, like I was like that. Oh my God,
I know,
really? No.
right? Oh man, such a great reflection there.
That's
But yeah, but
another
so
whole
the
day.
genetic thing, is I think, I mean, yeah, and I'm starting to believe that it's more about the environment too, because if you think about how our body responds so quickly to environment and how we can recover from that, it seems like that is kind of like what our biggest influence is right now. And I don't
Yeah.
know. No, I know there's science to back that up, and with some of the research that we read and some of Danny Roddy's research, but I think also there's a lot of research that still talks about genetics and epigenetics is one of those subjects too. I don't know too much about it, but I believe it has to do with the mom's environment, right, and how that translates to the child when they're in the womb. And yeah, so
Yeah, and
go ahead.
I'll interrupt real quick about that because I find it really a great plug to kind of look at what happened with your mom is important to see. It's not to dismiss it, but to say if your mom was in a hypothyroid symptomatic moments when you were being developed, they do affect you. And there is a knowing of like low energy that carried on into your birthing aspect could cause her to have problems delivering you. But mainly what I have hope is actually going to happen is more people are realizing through maybe our contributions and others that we kind of give you the research of who we follow, that they basically you can change the way you go into your pregnancies, you can change the way you develop with your child, and that the experience at the end is going to be a better situation. Because I just saw actually somewhere where a woman was couldn't be figured out what was going on with her. She was having a lot of digestion issues, and literally her stomach was kind of moving up and down, and she went to the hospital and laying there, and they couldn't figure it out, and they came up with a diagnosis that she supposedly had Lyme disease. And whether or not that's true, or is that's just one of the reasons they say, because Lyme disease is really hard to find,
Yeah.
but it actually has similar, I'll just say this, has similar issues to what happens to somebody who goes through any immune suppressive moments. But
Right.
so we have to kind of put that in the back burner. But what I'm asking to people to recognize is that, okay, if your mother is having distress, then the mother, she was having distress before she got pregnant, and they said that saved her and all the distress hormones that she was, I mean, sorry, the stress that she was having was causing the stress hormones prior to her pregnancy. And then when she got pregnant, everything was like it saved her life. And that is what we're talking about, is that part of our bodies is missing the progesterone.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
missing that counterbalance to all the stress that's going on. And so she actually introduced her body to regulating itself through being pregnant, because
Yeah. Yeah.
the body actually learns its way through stresses. And so it was fascinating because it brought up that that patterning is really interesting. So if you come through your mom, who's been through a lot at the time that you're born, whether it's massive wartime from people who just went through poverty, whether it's just simple, a stressed mom with, a high performance job, these things can affect the development, and we all know it, but we don't really know how well it translates to and through the uterus to the child, because we kind of downplay these symptoms, oh, I came out with this or I came out with that. But, condition wise, you may also carry hypothyroid symptoms. Not to say you have hyperthyroidism,
Right.
but you may have symptoms of which we like to call low energy.
Yeah, and so not attaching, I guess when what I want to clarify is we're not attaching to the symptoms, because that you can go in that direction as well. It's more about like, okay, let's not, meaning when you say downplay, I feel like what that means to me is like we're saying, okay, well, we need to provide our body with the recovery for that, right? Instead of just keep going. Is that what you're saying?
I'm
You
saying
think?
downplaying, like these symptoms are so small, like that's just who I
Oh, they're
am because my
subtle.
mom,
Yeah.
they're this is from my dad. This is
Oh, okay. I see what
normal.
you're saying. Yeah.
So we downplay the individuality of what's going on with your body. You're kind of looking at it as a way to say, this is just the way it is, and I can't change it. And
Right.
we're saying, look, or at least I'm kind of saying in this moment is, look a little deeper. There's something else going on that you may not want to pay attention to, or you do want to pay attention to, and yet you haven't found the keys to what would help change that. And we're saying with the keys that we kind of say, look at all of the keys at once and kind of say, okay, what works for me now? And just slowly take a little at the time to change, because your body is adaptable. It's whether or not we want to give it time to change in an adaptation.
Yeah, totally. And that reminds me of a study that I was reading about, that the study that was done, and I cannot remember who did the study, but it was basically the study that's supported the theory that omega-3 fatty acids are healthy, right?
Mm,
So the study they did was for number one, it was for a very short time, and number two, what I think the mistake that gets made is that it actually what it does is it slows the metabolism down. But
mm-hmm.
what people see is there's a decrease in inflammation, but for a very short period of time. But what it does is it does increase inflammation after that short period of time, even though because it is bringing the metabolism down. But the sugar that was given to the rats on the other end, they were comparing with. They now well they at first they thought it was how do I explain it, like something that was not good to be happening, but what was really happening was the sugar was causing the rat to have a higher metabolism. And what happens when I don't think we understand what happens when a higher metabolic rate is created, and what I'm seeing is that you are needing more nutrients. So what your body's going through these nutrients quick when your metabolic rate raises. So therefore, what we do is our metabolic rate raises because we do something that supports it, and then then we end up not feeding ourselves quickly enough or giving ourselves the right nutrients, and then we kind of slow down, or we think that there's these terrible symptoms, but really what it is our metabolism is raising, and we're not realizing that it's because our, for example, vitamin A is a really great example of like your body's going to go through vitamin A really, really quickly as your metabolism raises, but a lot of people don't know that, so they don't replace the vitamin A as they go through it faster. So it's like little things like that I think are so important to realize, because it's just it's kind of expanding our understanding instead of taking these little bitty segments of information and applying that to our lives, but more like it's almost like we're applying the information in a moving way, like it's moving. It's not like stagnant or still, right? So that's kind of a representation of kind of what science does. They tend to study, and this is a generalization, but they tend to study like things that are still, right? That are dead, instead of the live, like what really happens in life, how life works, right? So anyway, that's how I think of it. But I think that when we think about that kind of thing in motion, you got to remember that it's gonna, once you increase your energy, you're gonna need more energy. You're gonna need more reserves to support that. So that's what a high metabolic rate is all about. But we tend to, for some reason, the nutrition industry has been going in the other direction.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us back to meal frequency, which you asked about what that means. And I think that's what we're talking about is you actually as a being is as you're metabolizing more, you need to bring in more food, and it's going to be very different because you're thinking, oh, I started off eating this, standard 3 meals a day, or, to lose weight, I have to have a certain amount of calories per per this day and that day. And I think what we're kind of bringing along is that the frequency is to help the body keep going on through your day as you're getting healing. So that way, when you are going and wanting to do more, you're stabilizing the blood sugar. You're giving yourself that moment to say, oh, okay, I am doing a lot today, and I need to make sure I have the energy to support it. And, when you start to learn more about who you are and what you want and how you want to live your life, the more you'll be able to prep a little bit more time for that day. So you'll put more time into bringing a little bit more attention to your foods and how often you're eating.
Yeah, and I think that it's just so it's something that's not given enough attention to. Just the simple food frequency thing, right?
Yeah,
And yeah,
most of it's about, starving, restricted dieting. These, people only drink water because, that's what you're supposed to drink. And, there's no ideas beyond what the industry is trying to tell you until they have hit bottom and realize that some things aren't working. And
right.
what we keep trying to do is reiterate that what we've been through and who we've talked to and who've helped us have come to a knowing that, like what you're talking about, just to kind of circle back around, is Katie Bowman's is one of those people that's saying, you got to move your body. But if we're saying, yeah, we're moving your body, but making sure you have the energy to move that body. So it's incongruency of why you can do more and how you can do more. So hopefully this will help you kind of know that when you sit there and think, okay, I got to move more, it's going to be a lot easier. It's not going to be this forceful willpower I have to have.
Right. And I found the article that I was talking about. It is actually from the book Hair Like a Fox from Danny Roddy. He was talking about the history of essential fatty acids, and it began in 1929 when George and Mildred Burr published a paper claiming that a variety of diseases, including dandruff, dermatitis, slowed growth, sterility, and fatal kidney degeneration, were cured when their rodents were supplied with adequate linolenic acid. And anyway, so I just wanted to point this out because I just think this is so interesting because people still, are like, wait a minute, my doctor tells me to eat lots of essential fatty acids, and okay, there's a reason why you shouldn't do that, right? Um, so
And
anyway,
maybe we can tell them
yeah,
what omega-3s, omega-6 are, linoleic acid and stuff like that.
yes, that's a good, thank you. Yeah, and so please, yeah, correct me if I get anything wrong here.
No, no,
Yeah, yeah.
it's just saying, since you have the article in your hand, you can kind of tell people why what we're talking about is linoleic acid and linoleic acid, and what are those, and why we're talking omega-3s and 6s.
Okay. Um, anyway, so let's see. So being deficient in several nutrients hadn't been discovered yet. So basically, deficiencies in zinc, copper, manganese, and selenium. The fat deficient high sucrose diet caused the rats to consume oxygen at an extremely high rate and increase their metabolic rates. Some wondered if, rather than a deficiency of linolenic acid, the rats' nutritional requirements were simply higher due to their higher rates of metabolism, which is just like when I read that, I was like, wow, that's what our bodies do when we have that kind of nutrients. The suspicions of these few skeptical individuals were proven to be justified when the essential fatty acids deficiency was cured with the addition of vitamin B6, suggesting that rather than curing a deficiency, the addition of La was simply decreasing the rate of metabolism and therefore nutritional requirements. So, what that's saying is that the study was really about, like, it wasn't that we were deficient in the essential if fatty acids. It was that basically the rats' metabolic rate went up, and they were needing other nutrients that they were becoming deficient in because the rate of metabolism was just burning through all the nutrients much faster. So instead of replacing the essential fatty acids, you just add the vitamin B and A, etc., to the mix. And then
Uh,
as well, I'm pretty sure that we also produce LA in our bodies naturally, right? Or essential fatty acids. Is that true?
Well, we do. We have these certain ones, and certain ones we don't. And so that part of us needs to, without getting too far into all of what
Yeah,
that is,
I just wanted
I
to bring
think,
that study up because I just thought that
yeah,
was super interesting.
we can
Yeah.
actually put in the link if anybody else wants to see it. But I think what we're trying to say is that, more stresses cause, so they supplemented something, and then you got to be careful about what the study's talking about because it's framed on them trying to figure out if omega-6s and omega-3s are vital. And what we're showing is that some of these studies are actually showing that they were depleted of something, and then because they were depleted of that thing, then you kind of create that stress in the body. So like if
Right.
your liver's not working great, you try to supplement yourself with something, you're going to cause your body to work even harder because it's still not getting the energy that it needs to keep it in an oxidative mechanism. And when we're talking about cellular respiration and the things that we're talking about with Katie Bowman, is that when you keep yourself in good nutrition levels for yourself based on what you know works for you, you can then find that movement that you are looking for.
Right. Right.
And maybe we should go ahead and, leave it there. Is there anything else you want to add
No,
or
no, I think that was really good. I would say let's just yeah, let's just end it as I guess we could talk. Well, no, I think that's good. Let's end it there.
yeah.
So
So
thanks.
we
Yeah.
th
Yeah, I was thinking
thanks
I wanted to go
everyone.
into something else. But thank you guys for watching
Yeah.
and listening, and we will talk to you next time.
Yeah. See you soon.
Okay, bye,
Bye.
Maya.